My daughter-in-law said the words while I was standing at my own Oak Island the day before, Thanksgiving, with a pen in my hand. Just having you there would ruin the whole night, Krista. You need to accept that. Her voice came out of the little speaker sharp and rehearsed, like she had run the line a few times in the car on the way to being cruel. Then she laughed. A short, ugly sound. The kind of laugh you save for a stranger who stepped on your shoe. She had already shoved the word old at me twice. She had dragged out of touch across the phone the way you drag a full trash bag to the curb, holding it away from your body so it will not touch you. I stood there in the house I paid for, in the home I built a life inside of, and I let every single word land. What she did not know, what none of them knew, was that every deposit for that party, every vendor, every signature holding the whole evening together, carried my name and came out of my account. And in my other hand I was holding a phone, and I had about 15 minutes before any of it locked in for good. But let me back up. The way a thing starts tells you almost everything about how it ends, and I want you to see how this one started. My name is Krista. I am 66 years old, and for 31 years I was a court reporter in Franklin County, Ohio. I sat at the front of quiet rooms with a little machine on a tripod, and I took down every word that people said to each other. Depositions, custody battles, contract fights that turned two neighbors into enemies over 11 inches of a property line. I typed all of it, word for word, breath for breath. 31 years of that work teaches you two things. The first is that the truth almost never arrives as a shout. It arrives as one small detail that will not sit flat. A date that lands a day wrong. A number that is off by a couple $100. A calm voice that goes still for 1/2 second too long before it answers a simple question. The second is that the cruelest things get said in the flattest voices. The men who did the most damage in those rooms never once raised their volume. They said terrible things the way you would order a coffee. I had listened to Sloan order coffee like that for 2 years. That Wednesday morning, the day before the holiday, she finally aimed the same voice at me. My husband was Warren. He passed 15 years ago in the spring. Since then, I have hosted Thanksgiving at my house on Larkspur Lane every single November. 15 years of it. 15 years of ironing the good cloth and staying up past midnight to get the bird right, and making sure every person who came through my door felt like they belonged somewhere warm. This year was going to be different. Sloan had asked to host. She wanted the private room at the golf club, the one with the tall windows for 40 people. Real guests, she called them. People who matter in this town. I had said yes, and I had told myself I felt relieved. Then that morning I caught myself writing out the menu anyway. 24 names. Every dish my mother used to make. You keep setting a place for people out of pure habit long after anyone asked you to. I had my pen at the bottom of the list, about to add my mother's cranberry relish, when the phone rang and Sloan's name lit up the screen. Something pulled tight under my ribs. Not quite dread. More the specific tiredness you feel when you already know what is coming before a word gets said. Krista, she said, and there it was, that practiced edge. I am calling because Grant and I made a decision about tomorrow. I set the pen down flat on the stone. All right, Sloan, what decision is that? We are not doing Thanksgiving with you this year. She let that sit for exactly 1 second. Then she kept going, and her voice climbed with a kind of brittle pride, like she was reading from a page she had written and admired. Honestly, it is time you accepted that things have changed. I have important people coming. People who actually matter in this city. And I cannot have you shuffling around my event looking the way you do. You are old, Krista. You are out of touch. And frankly, just having you there would ruin the whole night for me. Then the laugh. I put my hand flat on the cool stone of the Oak Island. For 2 years, I had told myself a comfortable story about Sloan. That she was young. That she was under pressure. That she did not mean half of what came out of her mouth. Standing in my own home, listening to my son's wife describe me like a stain she wanted lifted off her tablecloth, I felt something go very still in my chest. Not rage. Something colder than rage and far more permanent. Is that everything I said? She hesitated. She had been braced for tears, maybe for begging. Some version of me scrambling to make myself acceptable to her. I just think it is better for everyone, she started. All right, I said before she could enjoy it. In that case, Thanksgiving is canceled. There was a sound on the other end. Half gasp, half stumble. What do you mean? You heard me the first time I said. You made your decision. I made mine. I will let you get back to your day. I ended the call. For a moment, I stood there holding that piece of paper. 24 names and the word cranberry sitting half written at the bottom. My heart was pounding. I will not pretend it was not. 66 years old, and it still cuts down to the bone to be told you are not wanted by someone sitting inside a life you helped build. But underneath the sting, something else was moving. Something I had not felt in a very long time. It felt like standing up after sitting too long in a cramped chair. I folded the list in half. Then I walked to the dining table, opened my laptop, and pulled up my contacts. Here is the part I need to be clear about because it is the whole hinge of the thing. Sloan chose everything for that party. The menu, the flowers, the linens, the guest list. All of it. But every decent vendor in this town wants a signature and a card on file before they will hold the Wednesday and Thursday of Thanksgiving week. And Sloan's own card had been declined twice back in October. I had seen the messages come in, so the contracts went in my name. The deposits came out of my checking account. She picked, and I paid. That had been the arrangement for 2 years, and until that Wednesday, I had never once said the word no. The caterer answered on the second ring. "Good afternoon, Harvest Board Catering. This is Dana." "Hello," I said. I kept my voice level, the same voice I would use to order takeout on a slow evening. "This is Krista. I have a Thanksgiving order for 40 guests for tomorrow. I need to cancel the whole thing." A short pause. "Of course. I do want to mention there may be a late cancellation fee this close to the date." "That is perfectly fine," I said. "Run whatever you need to run on my end." She did not ask why. People rarely do when you sound certain. I have watched grown witnesses fold in a deposition simply because the lawyer across the table sounded sure and they did not. Certainty is an authority all by itself. I hung up and went straight to the next number. The linen and place setting rental. Then the florist, a kind woman named Peggy, who had spent 40 minutes on the phone with me in October talking about Centerpiece Heights. I felt a small pang canceling on Peggy. She was a genuinely lovely person who had nothing to do with any of this. But the contract carried my name. The deposit had come out of my account, and every stem in that order had been chosen by Sloan to impress people I would never meet. The bakery was last. 4 dozen decorated maple leaf cookies and a spiced pear tart that Sloan had described without a flicker of irony as the centerpiece of the entire evening. "I need to cancel the Thanksgiving order under my name," I told the young man who answered. "Oh yes, ma'am, I see it right here. You are sure?" "Completely sure, sweetheart. Thank you." 15 minutes. That is all it took to take apart a party built for 40 people. A party I was never going to be allowed to walk into. I set the phone down and opened my banking app. 3 years ago, I had given Grant a secondary card on my account for household emergencies. That card had been busy lately with things that were not emergencies. Imported wine, a charge from a day spa, and a charge from the boutique in the new shopping center that I was fairly sure had not been a run for groceries. As the primary holder, I had every legal right to close that card at any moment with no notice to anyone. I tapped through to card management, selected the secondary card, and closed it. It took 11 seconds. One more thing because it matters later. For 31 years, my whole job was to preserve the exact record of what people said. A habit like that does not pack up and leave when you retire. Warren used to laugh about it. He would say something across the dinner table, and an hour later I could give it back to him word for word, and he would shake his head and call me the tape. After a contractor lied straight to my face 2 springs ago about work he never finished, I set my phone to save every incoming call automatically to a quiet little folder. Ohio only needs one person on a call to know it is being recorded, and I was always that person. So every call that came to me got kept. I had not thought about that folder in months. I thought about it then. I closed the app, walked to the stove, and put the kettle on. My hands were steady. My chest felt like someone had finally cracked a window in a room that had been sealed for years. Cold air coming in, sharp and clean and necessary. Through the glass over the sink, I could already hear Sloane's voice carrying across the 2 yards. High, frantic. Something about a caterer and a card that would not go through. I turned the burner to low and called my daughter. Paige picked up before the second ring finished. "Mom." Her voice was tight. She had already seen the missed texts from Grant. I could tell. "Talk to me. What happened?" So I told her all of it. Sloane's voice, the words she chose, the way she laughed at the end like she was clearing a chore off a list. I kept my own voice steady while I said it, but my throat ached in a way I had not braced for. There is a difference between knowing a thing and hearing it said out loud in your own home by someone who carries your last name. "She called you old," Paige said. Not a question. She did. And out of touch. A beat of silence. Then my daughter exhaled hard through her nose the way she has done since she was 7, and trying very hard not to cry from pure fury. Okay, she said. I am getting my shoes. 40 minutes. Do not do anything else until I get there. I already canceled the vendors and closed the card, I said. A pause. And then I heard the smile break through, even over the phone. That is my mother, she said. I am bringing wine. I hung up and stepped out onto the back porch. The late November air hit me like cold water. Honest, clarifying. I wrapped both arms around myself and looked out at the yard I had kept alone for 15 years. Warren's rose bushes stood bare in the far corner, just thin dark branches against a pale sky. He planted them the spring before he got sick. I had almost pulled them out twice. Something always stopped me. 27 years of marriage, then 15 years of learning who you are when the person who knew you best is gone. I had thrown all of it into this family, into Grant's future, into holidays and dinners and showing up early and leaving last. 2 years ago, when the little brick rental next door came open, I was the one who told Grant about it. I even walked over with him to meet the property manager. I did not sign anything. My father taught me a long time ago never to put my name on somebody else's roof. But I told them my son was good for the rent, and that was enough. I thought I was giving my boy a soft landing close to home. What I was actually doing was handing his new wife a front row seat to everything I owned. When Grant first brought Sloan around, I tried. I genuinely tried. I handed over the reins of the Thanksgiving planning the moment she asked for them. I said yes to the catered menu when she told me my cooking felt too plain for the people she wanted to impress. I smiled when she moved my dining room furniture without asking and called it updating the flow. I told myself all of it was generosity. Standing in the cold with her words still ringing in my ears, I could finally name it for what it was. Fear, plain and simple. I had been afraid that if I ever pushed back, I would lose Grant entirely. So I had made myself smaller and smaller 1 inch at a time until I was quietly funding a party I was not welcome at. The rose bushes rattled faintly in the wind. All right, Warren, I said quietly to no one and to him at the same time. I think that is enough of that. I went back inside, pulled out my heaviest pot, and started browning butter for a cream sauce. If my daughter was driving across town to sit with me, the least I could do was have something warm going when she walked in. And if the smell of a real Thanksgiving dinner happened to drift across the yard to where Sloan was standing, screaming into her phone, well, that was not something I planned to lose any sleep over. Paige came through the front door the way she always did. No knock, no hesitation, like she still lived here and always would. She dropped her bag in the hall, walked straight to the stove, and wrapped both arms around me from behind while I stirred. She held on for a long moment. Her chin dug into my shoulder. She was breathing hard through her nose the way she does when she is furious and working not to show it. I felt her let out one slow breath against my neck. The breath of a woman who had spent 40 minutes on the road making herself stay calm. Something smells incredible, she finally said. Cream sauce, I said. And there is a chicken in the oven. She let go and stepped back, pulling off her coat and draping it over a chair. Her eyes were red at the rims. She had been crying in the car. I knew it, though she would never once admit it. My daughter has always kept her grief private and her anger public. She pulled a bottle from her bag and set it on the counter with a firm click. Okay, she said. Tell me everything again, from the top, every word she used. So I told it again. This time I did not keep my voice quite so even. My eyes burned a little when I reached the laugh. Paige stood across the island from me with her arms folded and her jaw set. When I finished, she pressed her lips together until they went white. She said you would ruin the atmosphere, she repeated. Her voice went dangerously soft. To your face. On the phone, while she was spending your money. She picked up her glass, took one long sip, and set it back down. Mom, I need you to hear something. This was not impulsive. People do not say things like that by accident. She planned to say it. She was right. I had known it when I heard it, and I knew it now. There is something else, I said. I turned the burner down and leaned against the counter. About 6 months ago, Sloan offered to help me sort out a billing mistake with the power company. I gave her my account number and my login so she could call on my behalf. I paused. I did not think a thing of it at the time. Paige's eyes sharpened at once. You think she kept it? I think it would be naive to assume she did not. She set her glass down and pulled out her phone. Then we close every door she can reach. Tonight, before she thinks to use any of it. What else does she have? The secondary card is already closed, I said. I did that this afternoon. Good. The vendors all canceled inside of 15 minutes. For the first time since she came through the door, my daughter smiled. Wide, real, a little fierce. "Mom," she said. She reached across the island and squeezed my hand hard. "She has no idea who she called this morning, does she?" I squeezed back. Something that had been knotted in my chest for 2 years loosened just slightly. "Not even a little," I said. Paige refilled both our glasses. Then she turned toward the window that faced the street. "All right," she said. "Here is what we do. Tomorrow is the holiday. So tomorrow you cook. Everything on that list of yours. All 24 names worth. And we invite every person worth inviting to this house." She was already grinning. "Let us make sure the whole street can smell exactly what they are missing." I was up before the sun on Thanksgiving morning. That was not unusual for me. I have been an early riser since the children were small, back when the only quiet in the house was the hour before anyone else opened their eyes. But that particular morning I woke without an alarm and without the low hum of worry that had been sitting behind my breastbone for the better part of 2 years. I lay still for a minute just to notice that it was gone. Then I got up and started cooking. By 7, the turkey was in the oven with butter and sage worked under the skin. A pot of beef stew sat low on the back burner, thick with wine and root vegetables, because half my family would rather have my stew than any bird ever roasted. I was elbow deep in the crust for 2 apple pies when Paige appeared in the doorway in her pajamas hair, loose eyes still puffy from the night before. "Mom," she said and breathed in deep. "It smells like an actual Thanksgiving in here." "That is because it is going to be one," I said. "Hand me the cinnamon." She crossed the room and reached into the spice cabinet without being told. The easy muscle memory of a daughter who grew up under this roof. We worked side by side without narrating a thing. She rolled the second crust while I crimped the first, and for a while the only sound was the oven fan and the low gospel music I had put on in the front room. Around 9, Paige dried her hands on a towel and picked up her phone. "I am texting Uncle Dale and Aunt Sharon," she said, "and Cousin Bonnie, and the whole crowd, because I know for a fact they would all rather be here than anywhere near Sloane's seating chart." "Do not make it sound like an evacuation," I said. "I am going to make it sound like exactly what it is," she said, already typing. "Mom is doing a real Thanksgiving. Come if you want a real dinner." She looked up, sent. The reply started inside of 4 minutes. Aunt Sharon first, then Dale, then Bonnie, then Dale again, in all capital letters. Not one of them asked a single question about what had happened, which told me everything about how those catered evenings had actually felt from the far side of the table. They had been coming for 15 years because I was there. This year I gave them somewhere else to be, and they took it before the turkey was even out of the oven. By noon the smell had done most of the work for us. I could watch it happen. Cars slowed on Larkspur Lane. One woman actually stopped and rolled her window down before catching herself and driving on. I had set 2 pies on the porch rail to cool the way my own mother used to, and the cold air carried the cinnamon and butter straight down the block. And then Sandra arrived. I heard her before I saw her. The sharp click of heels on pavement and a voice trained to fill a room. Sandra was Sloane's mother, 61 years old and relentlessly groomed. The kind of woman who wears full jewelry to a casual lunch and expects you to notice. She had driven up from the far suburbs with 4 of her friends' women in wool coats and careful hair, all of them apparently under the impression that Sloane's Thanksgiving was going to be the social event of the season. I watched from the window over the sink as they filed into the rental next door. 40 seconds later, the volume inside that house went up considerably. Paige appeared at my shoulder, peering out with me. "How long before they come over here?" she said. I picked up my wooden spoon and went back to the stew. "About 4 minutes," I said. I was wrong. It took 3. The knock at my front door was hard, rapid, and deeply impatient. I opened it, and there she was, Sandra in full holiday armor. A cream wool coat with a fur collar, diamond studs catching the light, lips the color of a fresh bruise. Behind her, 4 women in equally careful outfits arranged themselves on my porch steps like they were posing for a photo nobody had asked to take. "Krista," she said. "She said my name the way you would name a restaurant that gave you food poisoning. Do you have any idea what you have done? Come in out of the cold if you want to talk," I said. I stepped back from the door. Not as an invitation exactly. More as a demonstration that I was not afraid of whatever she had brought with her. Sandra came inside without thanking me. Her friends followed, heels clicking on my hardwood eyes, moving around my front room with the particular assessment of women who have decided in advance to be unimpressed. "My daughter has 40 guests arriving in 3 hours, Sandra said, planting herself in the middle of my entry. "And no food, no flowers, no staff. and a card that your little tantrum turned into a useless piece of plastic." Her voice cracked under the anger. The sound of a woman who had bragged about this party to 4 friends the whole drive up. "She swore to me it was handled," Sandra said. "Do you understand what you have done to her?" "I understand exactly what I have done," I said pleasantly. "I canceled services that were contracted under my name and paid for with my money." "That is not a tantrum, Sandra. That is bookkeeping." Her nostrils flared. Behind her, one of the wool coat women shifted her weight. "You are being vindictive and small," Sandra said, her voice climbing. "Sloan has worked for months on this. She has real relationships on the line. Professional relationships. And you are willing to burn all of it down over what? Your feelings." She leaned in slightly, dropping her voice to something meant to cut. "Let me tell you something, Krista. You are an old woman living alone in a house that is far too big for you. Nobody is coming to rescue you. The least you could do is make yourself useful to the people who still bother to include you." The room went very still. I heard Paige's sharp intake of breath from the doorway behind me. I looked at Sandra for a long moment. The diamond studs, the careful hair, the 4 friends watching to see what I would do. And I felt something I had not expected. Not anger, not hurt. An almost peaceful clarity. This woman had just handed me the clearest possible picture of exactly what she and her daughter thought I was for. "Sandra," I said, keeping my voice as warm and level as if I were offering her a cup of coffee. "For 15 years, I made sure every single person who came through that door felt like they belonged somewhere. I cooked, I planned, I paid for it. And I did all of it because I loved this family." I paused. "Your daughter called me yesterday to tell me I was too old and too out of touch to attend my own family's Thanksgiving. So I made a business decision. The books are closed. You are welcome to go find another sponsor." Sandra opened her mouth. "And I would like my entry back," I added. "I have pies cooling and family coming." Behind her, the woman in the gray coat touched her friend's sleeve and said very quietly, "Maybe we should go, Sandra." Sandra's jaw worked in silence for a moment, fury and humiliation fighting for control of her face. Then she turned on her heel and walked out. Her friends followed heels, clicking faster now, none of them quite meeting my eyes. I closed the door. From the doorway, Paige let out a long, low breath. "Mom," she said, her voice thick. That was magnificent. I picked my wooden spoon back up off the counter. "The stew needs stirring," I said. The first ones through the door were Uncle Dale and Aunt Sharon. Dale came in, stamping the cold off his boots, unwinding a scarf, the color of pine needles, his big voice filling the entry before he was even fully inside. "Krista Marie," he announced. "Whatever is in that oven, I want 3 helpings, and I want them immediately." I laughed. A real laugh, the kind that starts in your chest and takes you by surprise. "Get in here and sit down, Dale." Sharon hugged me long and tight, her cold cheek against mine. "We heard the whole thing from Paige," she said quietly, pulling back to look at me with bright, fierce eyes. "You did exactly right. Do not let anybody tell you otherwise." My throat tightened. I squeezed her hands and did not try to answer that. They kept coming after that. Cousin Bonnie with a pan of macaroni she swore was an afterthought. Paige's friend from college who had nowhere to go for the holiday. Mrs. Pruitt from 2 doors down, whom I had been feeding Thanksgiving to for 7 years now, ever since her son moved out west. By 6 that evening, my dining room table was full, both leaves in. Every chair taken plus 2 folding chairs brought up from the basement. Nobody had assigned seats. Nobody had a printed menu card. The centerpiece was 3 mason jars of bare holly branches. Paige had cut from the yard, and the tablecloth had a small burn mark near one end shaped like the tip of an iron that I had been meaning to replace for 4 years. It was the best Thanksgiving table I had set in a very long time. From next door, the sounds were very different. A voice I knew was Sloan rose and fell in sharp, jagged bursts. Something that might have been a door slamming. Then Grant's voice lower, trying to smooth something over that particular tone of exhausted mediation I had been hearing from my son for 2 years. Dale leaned over to me while Sharon was passing the bread. "Sounds like the neighbors are having a rough night," he said with the careful neutrality of a man choosing every word on purpose. "Sounds like it," I agreed. He held my gaze, then reached over and squeezed my forearm once hard. "Proud of you, Krista," he said, and went straight back to his potatoes. It was Paige who spotted Grant first. She touched my arm as she passed behind my chair, leaning down to speak close to my ear. "Mom," she said, "he is standing in the side yard." I did not turn around right away. I took a sip of my wine, set the glass down, listened to Dale finish a story about a disastrous fishing trip that had the whole table laughing. I let myself sit inside that warmth for 1 more minute. Then I pushed back my chair and went to the window. Grant was standing in the narrow strip of grass between the two houses, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets, his breath making small clouds in the cold. He was not looking at his own house. He was looking at mine, at the lit windows, at the shadows of people moving behind the glass. His face, even from that distance, looked like the face of a man standing out in the cold, realizing for the first time that he had chosen to be there. I did not go to the door right away. I went back to the table, refilled Dale's glass, laughed at the end of a joke I had only half heard, let a few more minutes pass. Not out of cruelty. I want to be clear about that. But for 2 years I had rushed to smooth things over the second Grant showed the smallest sign of discomfort. I was done rushing. He had been out there almost 20 minutes when I finally opened the front door. He was on the porch, coat still unbuttoned, dark hair, a mess, his eyes carrying the particular exhaustion of a man who has been managing someone else's feelings for so many hours that he has forgotten to have any of his own. "Mom," he said. His voice cracked slightly on the word. My heart twisted hard. It always would. That is simply the tax of being someone's mother. But I kept my face steady and my voice even. "Grant." He ran a hand through his hair and looked somewhere past my left shoulder. "Sloan is really upset. The people who still showed up, she is trying to pull something together, and there is no food, Mom. Nothing." He swallowed. "She wanted me to ask if we could borrow the turkey. And maybe the good dishes. The ceramic ones with the blue rim from the hutch." The ceramic dishes with the blue rim had belonged to my mother. I ate Thanksgiving off those plates as a child. I served Warren's parents on them the first Thanksgiving after we married. I wrapped them in newspaper myself when we moved to Larkspur Lane 30 years ago. "No," I said. Grant blinked. He had expected a negotiation. I could see it. Some version of me sighing and giving in the way I always had. "Mom, it is just for tonight. We would bring everything back tomorrow. I swear. We just need." "Grant," I said. I kept my voice quiet, but I did not soften it. "Your wife called me yesterday and told me I was too old and too out of touch to attend my own family's Thanksgiving. I am not lending her my mother's dishes so she can serve them to the guests she invited in my place." Behind me, I heard the soft click of Paige's phone camera. Grant's jaw tightened. "Paige, do not." "Already sent," Paige said pleasantly from somewhere over my right shoulder. "To the family group," with a nice caption. I kept it tasteful. The color drained out of Grant's face. His phone buzzed in his coat pocket. Once, then twice, then a long, steady vibration that meant the replies were coming in fast. He pulled it out, looked at the screen, and closed his eyes for a second, like a man absorbing a physical blow. "I am sorry," he said. And I believed him. Not enough. Not yet. But the seed of it was there somewhere under the embarrassment and the mess he had made. "Go back to your house, honey," I said. "We will talk when things are calmer." I closed the door gently. From the dining room, Dale's voice rose over all the rest. "Who wants pie?" The whole table answered at once. The last guest left just after 10. Dale hugged me at the door for a long time the way he used to when I was in the worst of the grief after Warren died. He did not say anything elaborate. He just held on, patted my back twice, and said, "Good Thanksgiving, Krista." That was enough. Paige and I cleaned up together, moving around each other in the easy rhythm of two people who have shared a cooking space their whole lives. I washed. She dried. We talked about small things. Whether the apple pie had needed more nutmeg. Whether Mrs. Pruitt seemed thinner this year. Whether Dale's fishing story got longer every single time he told it. It was near 11 when Paige picked her phone up off the counter and went very still. "Mom," she said. Her voice had changed. "Come look at this." I dried my hands and crossed the room. She turned the screen toward me. Sloan had posted a video. She was sitting in what looked like her bedroom, her hair artfully loose, her eyes red in a way that suggested either real crying or a very practiced version of it. The caption read, "Dealing with a toxic mother-in-law who tried to ruin our Thanksgiving. My heart is broken." The video already had several hundred views. The comments were split, some sympathetic, some skeptical. A few pointed enough to make me think people were already sensing that something was off. I watched the whole thing with my arms crossed and my jaw tightening by the second. Sloan talked about feeling attacked, about working so hard on the holiday, about a mother-in-law who could not stand to see her succeed. She cried twice gracefully in a way that looked rehearsed. When it finished, I set the phone down. "She is good," I said. Paige stared at me. "Mom, she is genuinely good at that," I said. "I want to give her that." I picked up my dish towel, folded it once, and hung it over the oven handle. Go get my phone off the charger in the bedroom. Open the call recording folder. Find yesterday's incoming call. It will be the longest one. Paige understood at once. She was back in 45 seconds, phone in hand, the recording already pulled up. Sloane's voice came out of the little speaker, thin and sharp. Shuffling around my event, looking the way you do. You are old. You are out of touch. I stopped the playback. Posted, I said. As a reply right under her video. Paige hesitated, her thumb over the screen. Are we allowed to do this? In this state, I said, a call I am part of is mine to keep, and mine to share as long as I am not doing it to commit some crime. Sloane just published her own version of this exact conversation to the entire internet. Once she made it public, putting the real words next to it is not a secret being spilled. It is a reply. Paige's fingers were already moving. She typed one line to go with the audio. The truth before the tears. A reminder of how yesterday actually started. Then she posted it. We watched the comment appear beneath Sloane's video. For about 90 seconds, nothing happened. Then the first reply came in. Then 4 more. Then the notifications started arriving faster than either of us could read them. The sound of something tipping over. Slow at first, and then all at once. I turned the screen off and handed the phone back. Bet, I said, tomorrow will be a full day too. I slept better than I had in months. No dreams that I remember. No lying awake at 2 in the morning, running conversations through my head, rewriting things I had said, rehearsing things I wished I had said better. Just clean, unbroken sleep until the pale winter light came through the curtains, and I woke up feeling for the first time in a very long while like myself. I was standing at the stove making oatmeal when the knocking started. Not a polite knock. Not the tentative tap of someone unsure of their welcome. This was the knock of a man who had decided in advance that he was owed an answer. Hard, rapid, the kind that rattles the frame. I turned the burner to low and went to the door. Grant looked like he had not slept at all. His eyes were red-rimmed and swollen. His jaw carried 2 days of stubble. His coat was thrown on crooked like he had dressed in the dark and not bothered to fix it. Behind him, the sky was pale and cold and entirely indifferent to whatever he was feeling. Mom, he said. His voice was raw. Do you have any idea what you have done? That audio is everywhere. Sloane is destroyed. Completely destroyed. She has not stopped crying since midnight. He pressed one hand flat against the doorframe to steady himself. You need to post something. A correction. An apology. Something that says you took it out of context. That she did not mean it the way it sounded. She said I was old and out of touch, I said, and that my presence would ruin her party. What context improves that, Grant? His jaw tightened. She was stressed. She says things when she is stressed. You know that. I do know that, I said. I have known it for 2 years. I kept quiet about it for 2 years. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. At the exhaustion and the fear and the boy I raised somewhere under all of it. I am not posting a correction. There is nothing to correct. Grant's voice cracked open. Then what am I supposed to do? She is my wife, Mom. I cannot just... There are some things in the hall, I said. He blinked. What? I stepped back and opened the door wider. Against the hallway wall, neatly stacked, were 3 boxes I had packed the afternoon before while the pies were in the oven. His track trophies from high school. A box of winter clothes he had left in my spare room. And his father's watch, which I had kept safe since Warren died, and which belonged with Grant, no matter what else happened. These are yours, I said. I have been meaning to get them to you. Grant stared at the boxes. Something moved across his face. Not anger. Something worse than anger. Recognition. He understood what those boxes meant. A mother who packs up her son's childhood and sets it by the door is not punishing him. She is finished waiting for him to choose. Go home, sweetheart, I said quietly. We will talk when things are calmer. I closed the door. I stood in the hallway for a moment with my back against the wood, my eyes stinging in a way I refused to let become anything more. Then I straightened up, walked back to the stove, and turned the burner up. The oatmeal needed stirring. That night I found it. I was sitting up in bed with my reading glasses on and my banking app open on the tablet. I had not been looking for anything. Over the last few days, I had simply gotten into the habit of reviewing my accounts before sleep, the way you check the locks on the doors after someone has already gotten inside once. I scrolled through this week. Groceries, pharmacy, the catering deposit refunded minus the cancellation fee, and then near the bottom a line I did not recognize. AE Ohio Autopay. $184 and change. My own power bill was already there, 12 lines above it at $97 even. I sat very still for a moment with my heart going hard. Then I called Paige, who was asleep down the hall, and she appeared in my doorway 90 seconds later in an old college sweatshirt, blinking hard. "Look at this," I said. She sat on the edge of the bed and took the tablet. It took her about 4 seconds. "That is their account," she said flatly. "She set up autopay for their power bill using your banking information. The login you gave her back in the spring. That is what I thought. But look how she did it." Paige scrolled back and turned the screen toward me. "She did not even need your card, Mom. Your checking account was already saved as a payment method inside your power company profile. Once she had the login, all she had to do was add a second service address to the same account and check the autopay box. 2 clicks. The bank never saw anything but a normal draft going out for a normal utility." Her hands were shaking slightly with anger. I recognized the same tremor she had at 7 years old. "Mom, this is fraud. This is not a family dispute anymore. This is unauthorized use of your bank account, and it is a crime in this state." "I know what it is," I said. "Are you calling the police?" I looked at the number on the screen for a long moment. $184 a month quietly for how long? I scrolled back. October. It had started in October. "No," I said. "I am calling the bank in the morning to revoke the authorization, and I am calling the power company to report that my account was attached to a service address I do not own without my consent. That is all I am going to do. Whatever happens after that happens because of choices they made, not choices I made." Paige studied my face. "You are not even angry." "Oh, I am angry," I said. "I am so angry I can feel it in my teeth. But I have learned something this week, sweetheart. I do not have to do anything with it. I just have to stop paying for things that are not mine." She leaned over and rested her head against my shoulder for a moment. I made both calls at 8 the next morning. The bank representative was efficient and slightly appalled. The power company was efficient and entirely unsurprised, which told me more about how often this happens than I really wanted to know. The representative walked me through exactly what would happen next, and I want to repeat it here because I did not decide any of it. When somebody reports that their bank account has been attached to a service address without their consent, the utility does 2 things at once. It reverses the disputed drafts and it pulls the account off autopay, and then it suspends service at that address pending identity verification. Because as far as the company is concerned, they no longer know who is actually living there or who is responsible for the bill. Somebody with legal standing has to walk into an office with a photo identification and a signed lease and open an account in their own name. I did not cut anyone's power. I told the truth about my own bank account, and the company did what the company is required to do. While the bank representative was still on the line, I had already opened a second window and started on the other matter, the car. 3 years ago, I had bought a used silver crossover outright with my own money. The title was in my name. The registration was in my name. I paid the insurance every month without a word to anyone. When Grant and Sloan moved in next door and mentioned they needed something reliable, I handed them the keys without any conditions or paperwork because he was my son, and that was simply what I did. What I had never done was transfer the title. What I had never done was sign anything over. The vehicle was mine, legally and completely, and I had every right to arrange its return. A recovery service explained the process plainly. In Ohio, a vehicle loaned without any written agreement is what the law calls a bailment at will. I could end it whenever I chose as long as I gave notice first. So that evening I sent Grant a short, unambiguous text. "I am ending the loan of the crossover. A recovery service will collect it from the curb tomorrow morning. Please move it to the street tonight." Then I emailed the tow company the clean title, my license, and a signed release. The title had no lien on it and had never been transferred. The car was simply mine, and now it was coming home. The tow truck arrived at 7:45 the next morning. I was on my back porch with my coffee when I heard it. The low diesel rumble. The mechanical sound of the lift engaging. I did not go around front right away. I finished my coffee. I listened to a cardinal working his way through the frozen holly at the corner of the yard. The crossover was sitting at the curb where Grant had moved it the night before, sometime after midnight. He never answered my text. He just did it quietly and went back inside. And from the way that morning went, I do not believe he told his wife a single word about why. Then I heard Sloan. "What are you doing? Stop right now. That is our car. You cannot." Her voice came around the side of the house, high and fractured, the voice of someone who had not slept and had run out of the ability to control it. I set my mug down and walked to the corner of the porch where I could see the front of the house. Sloane was standing on the front walk in a heavy robe and boots, her hair loose and wild, both arms stretched toward the driver with the frantic energy of someone trying to flag down a vehicle that was not going to stop. The driver, a large, calm man in a green jacket, was finishing his work with the serene professionalism of a man who had done this many times and had been paid to be unaffected by the emotional part. "Ma'am," he said not unkindly, "the vehicle belongs to the registered owner. I have the authorization right here. She cannot do this. She cannot." "She can," he said simply. "She did." I stayed where I was on the porch. Sloane spun around and found me standing there, coffee in hand, watching. "You called a tow truck the day after Thanksgiving," she screamed. Her voice cracked down the middle. "What is wrong with you?" "The car is mine," I said. "We have no way to get anywhere. Grant has been on the couch for 2 nights. You have destroyed our lives, and you are standing there like it is nothing." "No," I said. Her words landed on me, and I let them. "I am standing here like it is mine. The car, this porch, this house, all of it, mine." I picked up my mug. "You are welcome to call for a ride. There is good coverage in this neighborhood." Sloane's mouth opened and closed. Her hands were shaking. Not with rage, I realized, but with something closer to real fear. The ground had been shifting under her for 3 days, and she was only now feeling how far it had moved. That afternoon, she made her next mistake, which was to take the whole thing back online. Paige found it first. A fundraiser the kind people set up to collect money from strangers. The photo was Sloane red-eyed sitting on the floor of the emptied-out rental. The story underneath it said that a cruel and jealous mother-in-law had stripped a young couple of everything: their holiday, their transportation, their savings. It asked kind-hearted people to help them get back on their feet. It had a goal of $10,000, and in the first hour it had already collected almost $800. Paige looked ready to breathe fire. "Mom, she is asking strangers for money, with your car in the story." I read it twice. Then I set the tablet down and thought about it for a minute, because I have learned that the loudest thing you can do is often the quietest. I did not write a paragraph. I did not tell my side. I wrote one line and I posted it as a comment right under the fundraiser in plain public view. "I am the mother-in-law in this story. I will only gently point out that my card statement shows a charge from the 21st of November for a designer bag $3,200 from the boutique in the new shopping center. That charge cleared 4 days before I closed the account. I am happy to share the itemized statement with anyone who is about to send money." I hit post and then I went and stirred the stew. By evening, the fundraiser was gone, taken down. And I learned later from Bonnie that Sloane had told a whole cluster of people at a neighbor's open house that the bag had been a gift she saved up for months to buy her own mother. A little Thanksgiving treat, she called it. She deserved something beautiful, she had said, turning it in her hands so everyone could see it. She deserved something beautiful, on my card, 4 days before I closed it. I did not have to say another word. The statement said all of it. Sandra called me at 9 the next morning, and her voice had changed completely. "Krista, honey, warm now, syrupy, the tone of a woman who had done some recalculating overnight. I think you and I got off on the wrong foot. I said some things I regret. I would like to come and sit with you and work this out like 2 grown women. Just us, no children, no drama." "That sounds sensible," I said. "Come at 10. I hung up and looked at Paige across the island. "She is going to try to negotiate," Paige said. "She wants the money turned back on." "I know exactly what she wants," I said. I set my coffee down. "Sweetheart, I want you to sit in the reading chair in the corner of the front room, the tall wingback behind the bookcase. When she comes in, do not greet her. Do not move. Just sit." Paige's eyebrows went up. "You want a witness?" "I want the truth on the record," I said. Then I picked up my phone and dialed Grant. He answered on the first ring. His voice told me he had not slept. "Honey," I said, "your mother-in-law is coming to my house at 10. At 10 past, I'm going to call you back, and I want you to answer on the first ring. Then set your phone down somewhere quiet and leave the line open. Do not hang up. Do not say a word until I tell you." There was a pause. Then, "Okay, Mom." That single word. Flat. Tired. Completely without argument. It told me more about the last 2 nights than anything I could have asked. Sandra arrived at 10, still in her good coat, her jewelry catching the light. She sat down on my sofa without waiting to be asked and crossed her legs. My phone lay face up on the coffee table between us, the screen dark, the way a phone sits in every front room in America. The wingback where Paige was sitting faces away from the entry tucked behind the tall bookcase. You have to be standing at the fireplace to see it. Sandra walked right past it without a glance. She had come to talk to a lonely old woman, and lonely old women do not set traps. Let us be practical, she said. You have made your point. Everybody has suffered. Now we put the card back on. We turn the transfers back on. And we all move on with our lives before this gets any uglier for anyone. Why would I do that, I said. Sandra laughed. An easy, confident laugh. The laugh of a woman who believed she was alone in a room with someone she had already beaten. Krista, sweetheart, you are an old woman with more money than sense. Sloane did not dream any of this up on her own. God love her, she does not have the imagination. She leaned back into my cushions. I told her exactly how to handle you. Keep you flattered. Keep you paying. Keep you feeling needed. Where do you think the money has been going these past 2 years? I have obligations down home that would turn your hair white. Cards, mostly. A few other things. And they have all been paid out of your checkbook, one holiday at a time. And neither one of us ever had to ask. The room went very quiet. Sandra's smile faltered. A slow dawning the way a person realizes the temperature in a room has changed. She turned her head. Paige was sitting in the wingback by the bookcase, arms folded, staring straight at her. And from the phone on the coffee table on speaker at full volume came my son's voice, cracked wide open. Louder than I had heard it in 10 years. Say that again, Sandra. Say every word of that again. Sandra's face went the color of ash. Her hands flew to her mouth. She stood so fast she knocked her purse off the sofa, and the sound of it hitting the floor was the loudest thing in the room. She left my house without picking her purse up properly. She scooped it off the floor with both hands, keys and lipstick scattering, and she was out my front door before I had even risen from my chair. I did not watch her go. I picked the phone up off the table. Grant, I said. Honey, are you there? For a moment all I could hear was breathing. Hard. Uneven. The ragged sound of a man trying very hard to stay upright. Then so quietly I had to press the phone to my ear. 2 years, Mom. 2 years. I know, I said. I defended her to you. His voice broke completely on the last word. I sat in your house and defended her to you. Grant. The line went dead. Paige came out of the wingback and crossed to me. She took my hand and held it hard enough to hurt, and I heard her breath catch twice before she got it under control. Through the window we could hear it starting next door. Sloane's voice first, then Grant's over the top of it, sharper than I had ever heard my son speak to anyone in his life. It went on most of the afternoon. At 4:45, when the November sky had already gone dark, and I had a pot of soup on the stove, because cooking is what I do when I do not know what else to do, I heard footsteps on my porch. I opened the door before he knocked. Grant stood there with a duffel bag in one hand, still in the same coat from the morning. And the moment he saw my face, he came apart entirely. It happened all at once. His shoulders dropped, his mouth twisted, and my grown son started sobbing on my front porch like a child. Great heaving breaths that shook his whole frame. Mom, he could barely get the word out. Mom, I am so sorry, I am so sorry. I reached out and pulled him inside. He half fell against me in the doorway, his bag hitting the floor, and I held on to him the way I had when he was 7 years old and had broken his arm falling out of the maple in the backyard. One hand on the back of his head, the other flat between his shoulder blades, holding him together while he shook. I let them use you. He wept into my shoulder. I heard the way she talked to you, and I told myself it was not that bad. I told myself you could handle it. I let them take from you for 2 years because it was easier than fighting with her. And I am so ashamed, Mom. I am so ashamed. My own tears came then. I had not cried once in 5 days. Not when Sloane called me. Not when Sandra stood in my entry. Not when I closed the door on my own son the morning after Thanksgiving. But I cried then, standing in my hallway with his weight against me and Paige's hand coming to rest on my back. I know, sweetheart, I said into his hair. I know. We stayed like that for a long time. Eventually I pulled back, held his face in both my hands, and looked at him properly. My boy, exhausted and wrecked and finally awake. Go wash your hands, I said. There is soup on the stove. He slept in his old room. In the morning I found him wiping down a counter that did not need wiping. Sit down, I said. We need to talk about what happens now. He sat with both hands around his mug like a man holding something warm in a cold place. You can stay, I said. Not the way you stayed at 22. $600 a month on the first. Your own food. your own laundry. Whatever you and Sloan built up, you pay it down yourself. I am not signing on to anything. I set my cup down, and you will not ask me for money. When Sloan asks you to ask me, and she will, the answer is no. The Bank of Krista is closed. Permanently. That is not a punishment, honey. It is what it should have been all along. He turned the mug slowly. Then he let out a long breath and something in his shoulders settled. That is the first thing anybody has said to me in 2 years that felt like solid ground. It landed harder than I was ready for. Here is what happens to the rest of it, in case you are wondering. Grant filed for divorce before the month was out. In Ohio, when 2 people cannot agree on the terms and there is fraud sitting in the middle of it, you do not get the quick, friendly version. He filed a complaint on the ground of incompatibility, which needs no year of waiting and no proof of anything except that the marriage was over. He drove downtown with a legal pad and a lawyer his father used to fish with, and he came home in time for supper. The lease on the rental next door had been in Sloane's name from the start. So was everything she signed for in a panic on Thanksgiving Day when she tried to buy her way out of the hole with servers and wine at holiday rates. Half of it never showed. All of it billed her regardless. When those invoices came due, there was no card left to absorb them, and nobody left to call. Nobody evicted them either. That takes a magistrate in weeks in this county. A 3-day notice, then a filing, then a hearing, then a judgment. They did not lose that house. They ran from it. Once the power went dark and the notices started arriving, they simply loaded a truck at 8 in the morning and drove away. Sandra's friends had already made up their minds long before the audio spread. Those 4 women stood in my entry the day of the holiday and heard in plain daylight exactly how an old widow was expected to be useful. The recording only confirmed what their own ears had told them. I heard eventually that mother and daughter had moved in together down home. I hope in whatever way is possible for them that they find their footing. I do not say that generously. I say it because I genuinely no longer think about them. And that turned out to be the actual victory. My neighbors, Beverly and Helen, came by that week. And Beverly, who was a labor nurse for 31 years and Mrs. Nothing, put a hand on my wrist and said the thing I had not been able to say for myself. You stopped holding the roof up, she said, and the roof did what roofs do. I kept waiting to feel triumphant. I thought I would enjoy that part more. That is how you know you are not the villain of the story, Beverly said, smiling into her cup. Grant came in that afternoon with sawdust on his jacket. A framing crew off the highway had taken him on starting Monday. He set a folded stack of bills on the table. Exactly $600. First month, he said. I sold the fishing boat this morning, the one Dad and I put the motor on. My throat closed. The next morning, Paige came in holding a pair of garden gloves. Mom, she said, you need to see the backyard. I followed her out the back door in my slippers, coffee still in hand. She had been out there since before dawn. In the far corner of the yard, beside Warren's bare rose bushes, stood a small live spruce in a burlap-wrapped root ball, no more than 4 feet tall, strung with a single strand of warm white lights that were still glowing faintly against the gray morning. I got it from the lot on the corner, she said. The man was practically giving them away. Nobody buys a tree the week of Thanksgiving. She shoved her hands in her sweatshirt pocket, suddenly shy in a way she never is. It is a live one, Mom. Roots and everything. I thought we could plant it. So it is here next year, and the year after that. My eyes filled so fast I could not stop them. It is beautiful, I managed. We planted it that afternoon, the 3 of us. Grant did most of the digging because the ground was half frozen, and he insisted. Beverly came over with hot cider and supervised from a lawn chair with the authority of a woman who has planted a great many things. Here is what I know now at 66 that I did not know at 64. For years, I confused being loved with being useful. I thought if I cooked enough dinners, paid enough deposits, and swallowed enough insults with a smile, I would earn a permanent seat at a table I had built with my own 2 hands. I was afraid that the moment I stopped being useful, I would find out I was not loved. So I found out. And what I learned was that the people who loved me had been there the whole time. My daughter driving across town without being asked. My neighbors carrying cider across a frozen yard. My son eventually finding his way back through the dark. They did not need me to be useful. They just needed me to still be here. Setting a boundary is not an act of war. It is the quietest, plainest kind of self-respect there is. And sometimes it looks like nothing more dramatic than a woman standing in her own home saying one word into a telephone and then hanging it up. 66 years old, and finally completely mine. If I could tell you one thing, it would be this. Do not be like me. Do not spend 15 years buying a seat at a table you already own. I told myself patience was a virtue, and God knows patience is. But patience without a boundary is just slow surrender. The loudest thing you can do is close your checkbook quietly. That first spring the spruce put out new growth, pale green tips at the ends of every branch. It stood beside Warren's roses, which bloomed that year for the first time in a long while, deep red against the fence he built. I do not know if I finally tended them right, or if they had simply been waiting the way I had been for the right season to start over. Either way, they came back, and so did I.